military life has been inspiring, but also recognizing that there are challenges that we look to support. So how I do that, kind of my personal philosophy is around connecting with others and building relationships. And so I've had the pleasure of about a year ago, I had this idea for this project on military on creating some kind of art project around military children. And so I connected with Brendan from the National Veterans Art Museum, Brendan Foster, and he said, you should talk to Moki. And so that's kind of a year ago what happened. And so I met Moki, and from the beginning, it was like magic. So I'm going to let Moki say hey, and then we'll say hey to everybody in the chat and get going.
Thank you, Kelsey, and welcome everyone. I am Moki Tantoko. I am the National Veterans Art Museum's Education and Programs Manager, and I am so excited to have this sort of formal, informal conversation with you all about a project that has been just so dear to my heart over the last year. And I myself am a civilian. I'm not even a military child. I don't have any veteran family members, but I came to work at the National Veterans Art Museum out of my undergrad from the School of the Arts of Chicago, and I saw an exhibition there called Surrealism in War, and I was totally taken away by the artwork that was in that show. And I said, how do I stay here forever? So I figured it out, and I'm an advocate for veterans in Chicago for the past 6 years. I am a huge volunteer with my local American Legion post, Tatler Post 973, where I do a lot of historian and conservation work for them in PR, but also at NVAM. I am just so pro community collaborations, and Kids Rank has been just one of the best partners I've had in my past 6 years at NVAM. So again, super excited to have some familiar faces. I haven't seen some. I saw Fernando a little bit ago, some of our military kids and their parents. So thank you everyone for joining, and some friends and people that have been a part of this project too. So I want to celebrate you all as well. So thank you for being here.
So if anybody wants to kind of out loud, just say hey, and that's on the session. No pressure. If you'd like to say hey and who you are and how you're connected to this project or to either organization or not, feel free to. We'll take a couple minutes.
Hey everyone, I'm Megan. I am the Collections and Exhibitions Manager at NVAM. So I'm here also representing NVAM. When Moki is speaking and going through the virtual tour, if you happen to have any questions about an exhibition, an artist, or an artwork, you can always drop that in the chat, and I'll follow up with you that way. And I'm just excited to join. We also have one of our volunteers joining, Karma. So that's great, and I'll go ahead and pass this wand to whoever wants to introduce themselves.
Well, I'll go. I'm Karma Park. I've been involved with National Veterans Art Museum for about 6 years, and in the last several months, doing different things over the years, but getting more involved in the last few months. It's really an organization that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm really excited to get more involved with Moki and Megan and everyone there and help carry out our mission. So I'll pass the baton now.
I'll go. Hi folks, my name is Hughes Turner, and I'm one of the recent board members at NVAM. I think I've been on the board probably 1 week. My background was a 30-year career senior officer in the Army. In addition to that, not only do I have kids, they're in their 30s now, but I also was a military brat during the Vietnam era. My dad was a career soldier. And the one thing I've learned, especially during combat operations as a senior commander, is that part of taking care of troops is taking care of their families. and that includes the kids. And I never thought about that very carefully as a parent myself. So it'd be interesting to hear what my now grown children would say, what their experiences were like, following me around and doing the things that I did, or not knowing what I did. So I'm very pleased to be able to be a part of this group here. And one other thing, I recently retired from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. I ran the regional office in Chicago. And prior to that, I was the Deputy Chief of Staff to Secretary Shinseki when he was the VA Secretary. So I'm one of those typical government bureaucrat background guys as well. So. That's it.
Does anybody else want to go?
I don't mean to call out our NVAM's media intern, who you will see later, Zachary Keltner, who did all the photography and the interviews for A Secret later. It's not a secret. His parents are on here, so hi, Zach's parents. Don't mean to shout you out on the internet.
Hi, how you doing? We're really looking forward to Zach working with you guys. He's been talking a lot. He's really proud of what he's doing. So thanks for having him as an intern.
It's great. I mean, this project, I mean, I've told, my parents are fine artists, and my stepmom owned an art gallery for 40 years. So this project is such a combination between my art sensibility and my passion in my work. And it just, the way that it's come together with the catalog, which we'll be sharing some of the pages from this afternoon, it just is, it's my favorite project that we've done to date. So let's get into it. So it started with a conversation. I think we're gonna have some slides pulled up for us. And really thinking about supporting military children. Funny enough, I mean, I had a conversation with some family counselors here. We're in Great Lakes on base, and we were talking about that sometimes kids need more than just, sometimes when kids are experiencing mental distress or, emotional issues, it's not that they need medication. It's not that they need, really intensive therapy. They might need alternative expressions to be able to voice those things, to be able to share in a safe way that feels very natural to them. And so this project, is really wonderful in that spirit. Moki, do you want to share a little about some of that?
Yeah, definitely. And I, again, just reiterating how wonderful this partnership has been and what has come out in terms of like realizing the similarities between what both military children experience and what we have observed at the museum, especially in education and programs with veteran creators, veteran artists, is that art making, art expression, art looking, right, are really powerful tools to sort of build that bridge of communication and understanding and connection that sometimes feels, especially I think within the veteran community, you can feel really isolated, and also within military families feel really isolated. So really what we're going to be talking about and looking at to the sort of brief virtual tour and talking about the museum's mission is, giving you a sense of this underrepresented group with both in the military, both veteran artists and also military families, which are huge parts of in like the foundations of what the military is people, right? But often are not talked about in terms of, we talk about like support for the military is very strong, but like what about support for the people that come transition out of it, that become veterans and their families and their friends, right? So to just dive in, the National Veterans Art Museum, which is located in Chicago in the Northwest Side in the Portage Park neighborhood, is the largest collection of veteran created artwork in America. And this is artwork created directly from individuals who have military service experience. We believe that everyone who has had military service, doesn't matter what their discharge, doesn't matter what, branch, what their MOS was, right? That they have served in the military is a representation of that voice. And we try to build a conversation between not only veterans to veterans, but veterans to their family members and friends, but also veterans to civilians, like myself, who was an individual that, didn't know that not everyone was called a soldier, right? Like had no idea about this demographic within, right? Like, I was 22 when I first went to the museum, and I said, I don't think I know anything about the group that is represented here. And just to be telling from that, here's an artwork that's one of my favorites by Leo McStravick called Falling Airman. And it's, as coming from the School of the Arts Institute of Chicago with art history minor, right? And like looking at artwork for years and years and years, like I was totally blown away by like how really beautiful and like aesthetically pleasing this piece is, right? But then there was this narrative behind it of it once you saw the title Falling Airman, which is, it's he was a Navy pilot in Vietnam. So like the experience of seeing like his comrades, right, like falling, and like how that had impressioned inside of his mind for years and years and years, and then to create an artwork to shows that this experience, and it's very subtle. You'll see like the like little foot in the corner, but I'm happy to be in education too, because we have so many programs that use the permanent collection as a mode to communicate to people. And we have partnerships with organizations from the Honeycomb Project, which is family volunteering together to like build about service, that we do service projects with and for veterans. And we also have the Quilts of Valor chapter that sews quilts to be presented to veterans from their family members as sort of a surprise, just to honor them, that do sewing in the museum, in the space. We have, you'll see in the right corner, you might have heard of Above and Beyond, which is one of our most famous permanent collection exhibitions, which is currently at the Harold Washington Library in Chicago downtown, which is a 58,000 plus replica dog tags of those that were all killed in action in Vietnam, and those names. And that work is very special too, because it was created by Vietnam veterans for Vietnam veterans, right? And also partnership, everything from our Memorial Day program, where we have both everything from performances, you'll see in the corner, local collaborations with, for example, Poet's Eye Artist Voice, which is, they read poetry and do dance performances and installations in response to the artwork, right? And also veteran programming in terms of continuing education and career development, education in the arts for Chicago and Chicago area veterans. And I really wish that we could be in the museum, because it would be like this, right? We would be in the artwork, under the artwork, in the space. This is from a previous exhibition, Original Warrior, which featured Native and creators, those veterans and non-veterans, talking about military service experience and impact on their lives. And, I would, here's a group of tours of third graders that we had in our space. And, also we could be in the things they carried, trying on objects in the museum. Here's some of my favorite pictures of, this experience of like, where else can you be able to try on actual artifacts that were donated by Vietnam veterans and like get that physicality, but then also be surrounded by veteran created artwork, photographs, paintings, drawings that were created by those individuals who these objects belong to. And so with this next about like 7 to 10 minutes, I want to give you this sense of what the space of the museum's physical space looks like, since we can't be there together right now. But here's the entrance to the museum, and to the right is one of our newest acquisition pieces. It's 22 portraits of individuals on this very large black box with individuals so if you could go to, yes, thank you. This work is painted on ceramic shields that go in the vest. So it's a piece of equipment that I think everyone can relate to, especially in the contemporary wars and conflicts. But it's 22 portraits of, you can see men, women, different race represented. All the individuals are from different branches, and MOS have different MOSs. And this work was created by 2 veterans and painted by an Air Force veteran, Sean Ganther. And it's talking about the statistic that 22 veterans commit suicide every day. And this is one of our newest acquisition pieces. And I appreciate that it's in the front of the museum, because it kind of gives you this, like, I want to challenge you in terms of what are you think veteran art looks like, right? I think when we think military art, veteran art, I think one of the things that comes to our head is like, oh, you mean like equestrian portraits of soldiers from the Civil War, right? Like in Grant Park. And I'm like, no. But this work is also very tied into what our conversation right now is talking about, mental health, right? So this artwork, Lionhearted, which I'll ask Megan to drop a link into the chat, which is each one of these portraits is attached to a interview of the individual who's represented here. And the idea is that, like, you could look at this artwork and then you could watch these interviews, and you can, if for example you're a veteran, see people who have similar experiences to you and be able to see how they have worked through them, right? And like what their transition back into civilian life has been like, and like how do they cope, and how do they work with other people to sort of like build out of what are very challenging experiences, right? Which can also feel very isolating. But also this is a piece for family members, for friends, and for civilians, because let's say, I think for the individuals here that have loved ones who are in the military, you understand like the challenges of not being able to maybe talk about something, right? And not being able to express that. Yeah.
Can I just jump in and just also say, I mean, I was going to hold it, but I think it's relevant, especially as you're going through some of these, that, you talk about the service members that, commit suicide and, or the stories behind these and the experiences that service members are going through, in coming back and transitioning in to, civilian life. And for me, my question always is, how does this impact their children? Right. And so just in terms of our conversation that we're having today, it's always in my frame of mind to think about, these expressions that the artists that you're talking about, and how they're, what they're going through. But I don't think that people always, think about that this experience that they're going through is also an experience that their children are going through. And what does that look like from their perspective? So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's perfect, because I think it'll lead into, as we go into the museum and go into the main collection, that, the breadth of work that's represented here is, everything from multi-mediums, right? We have, in the center here is an artwork by John Plunkett, which is a graphite on canvas. And if you go to the next slide, it I always talk to people about this because it reminds me of like Bugs Bunny a little bit, because it's like graphic and illustrative, right? It's like comical, but you have a representation. You see all these weapons that are coming behind these 2 trees. So there's this impression that there's like many individuals represented here, but you don't see them. It's it's funny, but it's dark. And I think there's something in this collection that can reach anyone, right? So if we're talking about understanding experience, right? On the next wall, there's another work here. Like you can see like installations, drawings, collage work. We even have like a game piece. There's this piece on this right side here by Charles Shoby, which is called Class of 67. And, it's more of that traditional vein of, oh, here's a painting, right? But in terms of also understanding and imagery, right? Here we have 2 individuals, a white man and a black man, who are both serving together in a unit in Vietnam, looking over what is, you'll see the combat boots that are covered, which represents the loss of life, loss of their comrades. And with a title of Class of 67, right? So these are themes and these are images that anyone that has combat experience especially kind of understands this, right? And so like we're talking about like so let's say these two individuals in the background transition out and they start families and like they carry that, and we're talking about like also like you can talk about like family trauma, like generational trauma, living into it. Like how do you talk to your kids, your spouse, your family members and friends about this experience that you're living and seeing, right? That's not something that comes through communication. And here's one of my favorite walls of, like also variety of size. And the piece in the center, which we'll get a close up of, is by an artist, Ulysses Marshall, who also served in Vietnam. And the last three artworks that we've shown you are actually all Vietnam veterans who all created this work around the same year as the early 80s, which is when the collection was started in 1981 by a group of Vietnam veteran artists. And this quote really, it's this, we're looking at this artwork, but this is a acrylic painting, but it has actually collage in the eyes. And this quote is, "The Vietnam of yesterday is my tomorrow, to give hope to helplessness and meaning to determination." And I just love this quote from Ulysses about, right, sort of like that, the bringing of your experience, right, into the future and been like, what can I do with this? And a lot of these artists were like, I'm going to make work about this. And, it wasn't make work to show in the museum, right? It wasn't make work to be exhibited and like represented in this way, but it's like to make because like my responsibility is to make, right? It's for futures. And we just want to show a couple other galleries in the museum. If anyone's a fan of Kurt Vonnegut Jr., which I totally am, we have very graciously a collection of screen prints of his that he did in collaboration with screen printer Joe Petro III. And these prints you might recognize if you read his novels are in his books. And Kurt Vonnegut was a World War II veteran who survived the bombing of Dresden, which was a bombing of Dresden, Germany by the Allies. And he was a POW, a prisoner of war. And he after he came back and, was going to school and trying to do work, he became a very prolific novelist. And I think you can put it in sort of the sci-fi, dark humor, satire category, but the images that he represents are all sort of drawing back to his military service experience and are represented both in his writing and in his drawings and his artwork, which is like this absurdity of war experience. And like the only way I can talk about it in this is sort of surreal, right? Like this absurdist way. But love this collection. And across the hallway from this gallery is a gallery of selections of our permanent collection of female veteran artwork. And thank you. This stat is really important because female veterans are at high risk for homelessness, especially if they are in poverty. And veterans are more than twice as likely to be homeless as other women, and more than 3 times as likely if they're at risk or in poverty, according to the VA. So, this gallery and the it's not every female veteran that's in our permanent collection, but it's a lot smaller than what we have in our breadth of 2,500 works, right? And it's very telling to the demographic of, right, thinking about female veterans who are receiving services, right? I mean, there's far less female veterans who are using their VA benefits, and they're all then identify as male, right? And that's represented in this why there's how many female veterans compared to male veteran artists that are making work, right? Because so many of them kind of turn to art making because they're using their GI Bill to go to art school, for example. And our main exhibition, which I am so excited about because we've been able to have it much longer than was originally intended due to the global pandemic, but been able to do a deeper dive in, is a solo show by Maurice Costello called Back to the Nom. And this show is sort of the epitome of what the museum mission is, in my opinion, that we're talking about transitions and journey and storytelling and narrative. And the work in here is one individual's journey and them looking at a retrospective of, from their time in Vietnam to where they are 50 years later in their 70s. And, it's to be able to look back on a lifetime is something that you have to get to the end to do that. And not everyone gets to be able to make that journey, but it's a journey that everyone goes through on their own. And Maurice in his work is able to represent sort of like where his military service has been in his life, but also where it's impacted his family as well, right? He was drafted in 67 into Vietnam when he was 22, which at the time was considered an old man, and, you know, transitioned out. And in the back corner here, you'll see these large, what we very fondly call the big giant heads, is our permanent collection piece called Autobiography, which are acrylic paintings on these very large wood masonite boards. And it's Maurice showing his autobiography with 5 different points of his life with all his face, right? But then you'll notice that the glasses change in between it with the colors. And you'll see, oh, there, the blue one is right before it is the soldier, his time in Vietnam with the orange, Agent Orange glasses, and then the blue. And that transition into that blue head, that blue face, that blue portrait is him becoming a veteran. And then the 3 portraits after it are him being a veteran, right? So I think it's important to note too that the transition into the veteran, becoming a veteran, is not just a moment, right? But it's also in itself a journey. And this is where I got excited. So that wall that we were looking at, these faces, these portraits of Autobiography, is actually on the back side of the exhibition of Masks of Hope. So for a museum educator curator standpoint, it's very cool to have this as you're walking through the museum, to be able to walk from one side to another, to be able to walk like literally across the wall and have these portraits, but then you have these other portraits, which is the project that we as a team have been able to work on pre-COVID, but then keep deep diving into and create this wonderful larger collaboration with. So I thank you so much, everyone, for the tour, listening to the tour. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type into the chat if you have them. But we wanted to, Kelsey, I'll open it up back to you too. We wanted to share some previews of our catalog. Sorry, I'm so excited.
I know. So this project that we worked on, it started with the idea, there's been an art project that's been going on in the veteran space and helping artists work through, their feelings around post-traumatic stress or, traumatic brain injury. And they've been using art as a way to do this. And so they've been creating masks that are reflective of those feelings. And so in some of our conversations last year, we thought it would be really cool to do the same thing with our kids, with our military kids in our program. And so in talking to Moki, we came up with this amazing program and curriculum that walked them through the process that started with really the idea of, what their feelings were, what color meant to them, what design meant to them. And so, that blue may mean sadness to one, but may mean, calm or joy to another. And it was all a personal experience, not something that, they needed to feel they had to get right, which was really important. And so the kids were able to then draw flat versions of their ideas and really kind of map out, what they wanted to do before translating those to these beautiful 3-dimensional forms. And the program ended with them doing write-ups. We had some veterans come in. Moki came in during our sessions each week. We had some veterans come in and talk to them through the process with them, and then starting to write, this is Tawanda in this photograph here, working on her mask, her flat version, and translating that onto her 3-dimensional mask. And so what they needed to name their mask. They needed to think through, what did that really mean? What did them being a military child, and how was this mask representative of them being a military child? But then what ended up happening was COVID. And so our 4-week program got halted because of COVID and not being able to go in and meet. And so where we got the bulk of the program completed. There's still some write-ups that were not done, but in thinking about it, so we were able to put together this catalog, which is by far, and it's stunningly beautiful. Some of the images that you're seeing were taken by Zach, who was amazing. He and Moki came out and took photographs with families and really did interviews. And so this catalog is really a representation, and the exhibit of, I feel like it's a commentary on the mental health of military children. It's a conversation. It's the beginning of a conversation that allows us to explore really what military children are feeling, how they are feeling about their experience. There are so many heavy topics that go in, when people think about military and veterans, like Moki was sharing, and this art is a mechanism for them to share those ideas. And so it's really been surprising for me, like reading through some of the write-ups. I think I've shared with Moki in the beginning, for me, and I'll let Moki speak to it also, but I was expecting in the write-ups to see a lot of, I feel very sad, or, I miss this, or I'm hurt. And I was kind of taken aback that there was a lot of hope. I mean, I think that's why we call it Masks of Hope, because the themes around it, these kids were able to, in their expression, were identifying things that brought them joy. So those places, so somebody might have done a color scheme because they reminded them of a sunset that they got to experience with their whole family. Or, this reminds me of, I did this trees and sky from Hawaii because it was our favorite duty station that we've lived in. And, even one is like, Kids Rank is my place of joy, which of course I love. But what I so much got out of it was that even adults don't always have the ability to identify where they find joy, right? And so when you're having moments of sadness or anxiety, to say that I'm feeling this now, but I do have hope, I think is really powerful, and which goes into the building of resilience, because not all military children are resilient. I think I do agree that the word is used, kind of very broadly, which almost does a disservice that if you're not resilient, that, maybe you're not getting something. And I think that it's something that has to be built and nurtured. And so, but I think through different activities, programming such as this, with this partnership, the work that we do in working with our kids, and our phenomenal leaders that meet with our kids every single week, and our team that builds these things out, and through this conversation, this foundation series, in finding these resources, us all working together does allow for this building, helping these kids build resilience. And I just am blown away by the representation in this exhibit. I mean, walking in to see them hung, I'll let Moki share a little bit about that, but it's a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, and there's so much that's come out of, being able to, I think if we're thinking about like challenges that, presented by COVID, right? Besides that, COVID happened and we were still running programming. Like there are a couple of groups that weren't able to complete their masks to the extent that other groups have been able to. We had this idea when we were going to exhibit this originally during Military Child's Month, right? Which is April, and then we just couldn't. But because of that, we were able to do a deeper dive into this project and looking at right, how are we going to represent so many voices here. And when we were developing the curriculum, we started with this question, which I kind of want to ask everyone right now, right? Think about it. What color are you feeling today? And I think if you ask adults, very, very commonly, right, we already have these pre-associations with, if you have a color you're feeling today, feel free to type that in the chat. Whatever color we associate with happy is kind of even across the board, right? But Oh, I am also green. Sorry. But when you ask the kids, it's amazing because you will have 7 kids say they're all feeling really excited, but say 7 different colors, right? And so many olive drab, right? Always olive drab. Army.
It's a green day.
It's a green day.
Green day.
And when, for me especially, I think I can't wait to have everyone to be able to see the mask in person, because it's very surreal when you work on a project and you're going through different program sites, right? And you work with like everything from 12 to like 15 kids to 7 kids. And then you see all 100 and it just happened to be 100. Like, that's super weird, right? It's 100 masks up on the wall and you're looking above it, you know, depending how tall you are, you're looking that there's that shot where the pink mask and you're looking on the side. If you stand on the opening of the doorway and look up, you're like in a line with all these, you're in a line with all these faces, right? Which are all individuals. And I think it's very related to, I think there's something about like work that works in multiples, right? You're looking at like the breadth of a whole entire wall, right? You're looking at like representations of individual people, right? We're all military children. We're all that, you know. And then I think it's important for me through this partnership, it's important to note, like, when you say military children, it's not just active duty kids, you know. Veteran is military, so veteran children. And Kelsey made a really important point to me. Every one of the children that is represented in this mask will one day be veteran children someday, right? And you know, that's, if we're talking about like labels and titles, right? That, ooh, I like, you're like, yes, that's exactly, it's part of like this, you know, these demographics are not separate.
Right. And if they're veteran children, right, how are they then now growing up and coping or dealing with those ideas and the things that they go through? You know, how do they carry that forward into adulthood? You know, I think that like Hughes shared that his children are now grown-ups, you know, in their 30s. And so how did they take, you know, what experiences they went through as children and, you know, translated that into their adult life? And so I think that, you know, the better that we equip and, you know, nurture and support the kids now, and also, not for nothing, I think I've said this on another one of the sessions, that over 50% of our currently serving are children of veterans. So that means that, you know, they might go on to go into the service. And, you know, so what does that mean for our future, you know, military members and our community? And, you know, even if they don't go into service, how are they then looking at the world and viewing the world and contributing? And so this is a really nice commentary around
that. I have so many things to say, but I know. Oh
wait, I want to answer Carmen asked, what are the masks made of? So we did buy at the very beginning, we thought, oh, we could have them make all molds of their face, you know, and then we realized the amount of time that we worked from kindergarten through 8th grade, that it was better. We purchased pre-made paper mache masks. So they're all made on paper mache masks. And so, yes, they all started with basically the same blank, and then they built up. Some are multimedia. That they use feathers and glitter and paper and, you know, paint and markers and, you know, anything that they wanted to create their images.
And I really love that the exhibition itself on the wall, you know, we aren't distinguishing like who's who, right? So you're not sure what age anyone is. You're not sure what branch of family they're from. You're not sure if they're identify as male or female, right? Because you'll be really surprised about some of these, you know, like, I think it really challenges our perceptions of not only like what are the general feelings of military children, right? Or like, well, what, it must be really tough to be a military kid, right? And hardship, and your parents must be really, I remember a kid saying, yeah, people always think my parents are really strict and like I don't get to do anything. And you're like, that's not true. I was like, okay, thank you. But right, like you'll be surprised about, especially if you know these kids. And remember, Kelsey, you're talking about like, this is the most tomboy kid ever, and why is it just totally pink, right? Because it's, again, breaking down that, you know, I think the expression, right, which is why I like that we use the word alternative expressions as opposed to therapies, because, you know, not all the artwork in the museum of the veteran artwork is not art therapy work, right? Some of our permanent collection pieces were made in art therapy, but it's artists making work, right? And maybe we can say art making is therapeutic generally, right? I also think art looking is therapeutic, right? But it's connection and expression, and like these kids, it's just incredible their ability to express, like what you said, like the way that adults can't express what they're feeling, and they're so ready to. They're like, I'm feeling really mad, and so here it is. You know, there's no censorship there, right? It's beautiful, and it comes out in the tactileness of their making.
So do we want to open up if anybody has any other questions, or, you know, ideas, thoughts about what you want to share, you know, based on some of what you've heard today? We are happy to, we do call this a conversation. So we would love to hear from you all, and you know, or even learn from you if there's anything you want to share. I mean, Moki and I have plenty that we could share.
Oh, we could talk for the rest of the whole day.
This is Hughes. Is it possible to get that slide deck that you used?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. We can definitely share that. Absolutely. And then I will say is that what's really I'm thrilled about is that the catalog, you know, will be able to share out as well. And so that'll be available in early January. We're just doing the finishing on the final edits before it goes to print. And so that the catalog itself will be available, but I'm happy to share the deck as well. And I love that I feel like this exhibition will start at the museum, but then we've had conversations with some other museums and spaces about having the exhibit travel. And so that we can have this conversation continued with this visual representation, because I think it's sometimes easier to talk with the framing of, you know, the context of art, to start talking about, you know, these topics around military children and what they experience. So the catalog itself, like we broke out some topic areas like separation or relocation, but then we also talked about service and, you know, and those diversity, you know, within there that all kind of play a part in how our military children experience things.
Karma asked, what other prompts did you ask besides what color are you feeling? So I think in terms of, because I developed the beginning curriculum, we were talking about like, what color are you feeling, but like, why did you associate this feeling with that color, right? And then sort of deep diving into the connection of like association with like memory. But we also asked like what Kelsey was mentioning, the write-up, right? Like having the kids reflect on like, how many times have you moved, right? And, you know, like when you were making the mask, how did you feel? Or like, what is something that you wish you could tell us about the mask that we can't see it in here? Or like, why did you choose to do certain colors or add certain things to it? And yeah, the responses were wonderful and delightful, but also, again, like Kelsey said, really surprising too.
So Jill asked, how did the kids feel about having their art displayed publicly? I cannot tell you how excited they are. Like, we are so sad that with COVID, because we're trying to plan these exhibitions. I mean, could you imagine like the idea of having at, you know, 7 years old, having something that you did be displayed in a museum? I mean, that's just crazy. And so as soon as the museum opens, that, you know, we'll be scheduling tours. But true to, I mean, I think about COVID in the sense that it's an interruption, you know, globally, right? But I think about our families and how that they have experienced and continue to experience interruption of life, and so we figure it out. And so I, again, like thinking about this exhibition. So probably I would say half of our participants have now been transferred to a new duty station.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
We'll not necessarily be able to come see it here in Chicago while it's here in person. And which was sad because we had planned for, us to finish the project and within the same program year have, kind of an open house where they could come and see it. And also up here closer to the base, working with the Highland Park Arts Center and doing an exhibition there, which we will still do. But yes, they are. That was a long answer for they are thrilled to have their art displayed, and everybody that all the kids that are whose art is of the 100 masks that are in the catalog will also get a printed copy of their catalog, so that they can forever have that as a keepsake.
And I don't mean to put a specific person on the spot here, but because the process is we ran the program and then there was a pause and then we're like, okay, let's do an amazing catalog then, right? But we added so much to the catalog, which included being able to actually go, over the course of transitions with COVID regulations, but with Zach, our intern, go interview military families. And I remember I see Cynthia, Francisco, and Fernando, right? I remember Zach and I brought the mask over and interviewed, and that was the first time the parents were able to see the artwork, right? Where some of these interviews. And also now that you see, and you haven't seen even the photographs that Zach took during the interview. So that was probably your first time seeing those photos, right, Cynthia? Yeah, she's nodding. She's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, do you have anything how do you feel about seeing, something that we did a couple months ago, now in print?
It looks good. It really great. It brought tears to my eyes just to see the picture. It's like the expressions with Dad. Oh my God.
They are, I said, we're going to have to, the photographs that Zach took, I feel like we need to do an exhibit with just printed photographs of the families, because they just are beautiful. They are so strong and powerful. Like I agree. The photos with your sons and your husband they just are really beautiful, and just have such a softness that captures really the relationships, and all of them do that. We have these candid photos of these families, and seeing them together is really powerful.
If I can I'm sorry, a thought just occurred to me, being an older guy now, almost 70, reflecting on my own life as, not only as a career soldier, but really as a dependent. And a program like this wasn't in existence when I was a dependent on Okinawa, where we were very close to the Vietnam War. Almost every kid in my school, parents were involved in the war in Vietnam because of our strategic location. And now looking at this kind of stuff, which kind of raises an awareness within myself. How did I feel when I was that age? Really, and beginning to reflect now, there was anger, there was bitterness, there was no outlet for us to have this type of expression to people who would understand, other than, maybe acting out, getting high on drugs, getting arrested by the MPs, and having your parents come pick you up out of the local pokey, which was probably a stereotypical image of a military dependent kid, at least on Okinawa. But it is important, and you have an opportunity to reflect and said, they're reflecting exactly what I felt at that particular moment in my life, but I had no way of expressing it.
Yeah.
So it does impact older people too, is what I'm trying to share with everybody.
No, I agree. I mean, that's why it's so surprising to me, like research around military children is only about 20 years old, right? Like it's relatively new. And how long have there been military children? As long as there's been a military, you know? And so the fact that it's only now that we're really starting to pay attention to and, you know, create these spaces, like for us, you know, I think one of the things that makes Kids Rank a little different is because we do meet with our kids on a weekly basis. And so being able to have these spaces where there are kids together that are going through like these experiences and having the structure of the work that we do and be able to express either through partnership with other organizations or just through resources has been, I believe it'll have long impact as we move ahead and think about how we support, you know, our military families and the kids specifically. So, yeah. That's it. I actually, Hughes, I'd love to talk to you because we're talking about, we want to talk to some former military kids and kind of where they are now and really think about like how did the, you know, being in the military, you know, being a military dependent impact your life, you know, as you've grown up. So we can talk about that later.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Having been a career guy that actually, you know, lived on military installations, you go from one place to another. We're in different times now in which we have heavy utilization of the citizen soldier, the reservists, and the National Guardsmen, and what type of impact that has on them, where most of them are in relative isolation in civilian communities with very little contact with military, by somebody being stationed at Pope Air Force Base or Great Lakes or Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where you have a whole community of military families. And what type of impact, whether or not they feel more isolated in Chicago because of that. I mean, I don't know. You guys may have seen more of that. I don't know.
No, go ahead, Moki.
No, please, you first.
I mean, in our last session in November, because November is month of the military family, one of our panelists is a National Guard spouse, because again, to us, in part of this foundation's conversation is recognizing that there's not a one size fits all military family. Like when people say that, they do have a very kind of monolithic idea of what military family looks like. And I think through these conversations, specifically like the Guard, you know, there are military children in every single zip code across the country. And that in large part is due to the Guard, because they are in our civilian communities and people don't know and recognize that there might be military children living right there with them and that are going through challenges with a parent being away. I mean, the Guard has been relied on heavily over the last 20 years, multiple deployments, multiple, call to, I mean, even during the pandemic, or with the civil unrest and all of the, being called to different parts of the country. And what does that mean for the family, the dependent family at home that doesn't have other military resources or other resources around them to support through those times? And, that isolation, that's a real thing. And so what are we doing for those kids? How are we providing resources for their support? Great point.
I wanted to mention too, kind of like bringing back, there were a couple of points mentioned about like what happens if this was available, 50 years ago, right? What happens if the museum existed 50 years ago? Because Megan created the Things They Carried interactive, which I didn't get to touch on, but we have what our permanent collection exhibition is called The Things They Carried. And it features, artwork from Vietnam veterans, like during that time in Vietnam. And in her interactive, there's actually a picture of a group of reservists that are in the exhibit because during their monthly training, I was contacted by their commanding officer can I bring my reserve group here so they can understand what the future of the veteran experience is like? And I said yes. But I remember being really blown away by the connections that they were making with, again, I guess across time, across space, across branches, right? That there was a conversation came up that they said, I've never actually talked to anyone outside of my reserve group before about this, but understanding that that all around you. You're not going to know who a veteran is or who has military family members or who's a military family because they're not always wearing their cap or a t-shirt, right? Or, I think that's been the thing that opened up the mouth around is that the impact of military on all our lives. I'm a daughter of immigrants, and after working at the museum, I'm realizing how deeply involved, especially my parents are from the Philippines, like how the military influence with like them coming to America, it's like a huge part of like why I'm even here, right? And it's not something that I think we were thinking about, like how connected we actually all are. And like I think showing these stories through the veteran artwork, through the Massive Hope exhibition, will open up these doors in terms of that dialogue of like, let's realize how more connected we are through these underrepresented stories than we are not.
So I think that's a great way to kind of, wrap up today's session, and just say that I had a really good suggestion in the chat about there's a museum, the Sailor Museum, right next to naval stations, which would be a great location to connect with them. And so if anybody watching today has any ideas of places that might be a good place for the exhibition to come and really maybe host a conversation, I think that even more than just, having the exhibit come, but allowing some space to have some dialogue around military children and how we in our different communities, I mean, anywhere, can best support them would be wonderful. So I'd like to thank Moki for joining us, and Megan and the NVAM team for really just, this project has been wonderful. And my team, Meryl and Ashley and Kayla, who had to jump off, for making all these things happen. And our guests here on viewing today with us, and anybody on Facebook Live that is watching. We will post this again, and please feel free to share this. And we're going to continue over the next, the rest of this, well, not just this year, through September, to continue to have these conversations and really talk about, where we find challenges for military children, but really resources. We like actionable things. So where can we find resources then to support them? And how can people get involved in welcoming our families into their communities? So again, thank you so much for being with us today. And next month, we'll be talking about, we'll be partnering with Camp Corral and talking about children as caregivers, and how having a parent that might be injured or dealing with mental stress or mental health issues, and how they become sometimes the caregivers. And so that will be in January. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next month. Happy holidays. Enjoy your holiday.
Yes.
And we'll see you soon.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much, Kelsey.